Welcome to Rebel Health Radio, bringing the best in alternative and integrative medicine to your ears. Hello everyone, it's Patricia Warby, Alchemy Therapies, my emotional audit, and all the other things I do in the arena of the mind-body connection and healing. And today I want to talk about pain. Now, pain has been on my mind for a very important reason this week, in that, quite apart from all the clients I deal with who are in, chronic pain, I had a bout of it myself. I crashed very spectacularly over onto my arm while out running on Monday morning. I've ruptured some tendons. I don't know if you can see, the bruise is quite spectacular on my bicep. And of course, because everything is connected, I've also damaged my shoulder, rotator cuff muscles, even the shoulder blade itself. The attachment points are very strained, but the main damage was to my bicep, because in order to save myself, I can't do it with the hand that did it, but that's the movement I can't do right now. I put my hands out to save me, and obviously then crashed onto my left-hand side, as it turns out. Now, I've just had a treatment. You can't do it immediately. You have to be just doing first aid, and that's homeopathic arnica cream, anti-inflammatories for the pain, ibuprofen. There's time and a place for drugs, and this was one of them. Takes 5 days for ibuprofen to kind of have its inflammatory effect, so anti-inflammatory effect, I should say. And so it's a course I'm taking. Obviously, the first few days were so painful, I was on quite a few. I'm now down to about 3 a day. That's enough just to keep everything functioning. What you don't want is to be in so much pain that you lock up and you can't function. Not so that you can carry on doing what you've always done. You absolutely have to rest, and ice, rest, elevation if possible, all of which I've done. The other things you can do for acute situations like this, if you happen to have a TENS machine, or this is a DENAS, DENAS, which has different frequency, frequency waves, if you like, that vibrate and help. 77 hertz is the frequency of anti-inflammatory effect, and you just basically very gently work over the area. Now, you can't work directly on the bruising initially. You have to be very careful, but you can work on the tendons either side, and then also you can work on some of the pain points. There's a very important one. If I can just raise my hand, I can lift my hand if I do carefully, between the thumb and the forefinger. So you can press on that, and that transfers a kind of electrical signal basically up your arm. You can also do inside the arm creases, and there's another one here on the shoulder, just underneath the collarbone. Now, all of that is quite tender for me at the moment because it's quite a recent injury. I'm 3 days in. I didn't realize how badly I'd hurt myself, to be fair, but I did know that something was terribly, terribly wrong, because I actually had to be cut out of my jogging top. There was no way I could get my, I had a sort of a hoodie. I just couldn't get that because I can't raise my arm. I can't even move it out at the minute, and certainly not on the day I did it. And it was boiling that day. I was wearing a hoodie because it was 6:45 in the morning. And at that time of the day, you do need a little covering. But as the day wore on, obviously I had to take that off. So we cut that off. A bit dramatic, I know, but there we go. Needs must when you're in acute pain. All right, so those are the things: rest, elevation, and ice. If you think of those things, and basically looking after yourself. I had to cancel appointments with clients because you can't work when you're in shock. Oh, that's the other thing: rescue remedy for shock. Very important in the first few days, because your body is in trauma basically, and it holds on to trauma, as you know. Having just had a treatment, I can tell you, I had a TUINA treatment, TUINA, which is very gentle sort of manipulation, vibration of of the soft tissues around the joint. And generally I have it all over, but he was very specifically working on the area around the damage. He can't work directly on the damage, but he can work around the areas. And I can feel the relaxation response going through my body. I can now move my shoulders back, which I couldn't do yesterday. And a sort of shivery feeling and a bit emotional as well. And that brings me on to my second point, which is the difference between acute and chronic pain. Now, I know why I'm in pain. I know. I can see the evidence. Okay, I've ruptured some serious blood vessels here, and my tissues are in the process of healing, which will take weeks, perhaps months to fully heal. But there are many, many people who suffer from chronic pain, and that is anything that is over 3 months, because it should be within 3 months, the body should heal whatever tissue damage there is, particularly if you use tools like I'm using to enhance the healing. And some people are in so much pain that they can barely function. I have some clients like that. And I wanted to explain, based on my book, The Scar That Won't Heal, chapter 7 dealt with this kind of pain. So you've got acute versus chronic. Let's dive into chronic pain. Okay, chronic pain has a number of different categories too, but let's look at neuropathic pain in particular, because that is the shorthand version of that is brain pain. Okay, so what happens in the brain is that sensory signals from the body get interpreted by the brain through the thalamus and then onto, hopefully, the prefrontal cortex, where they get evaluated before sending a signal to your amygdala, which is your threat center. And because pain is obviously linked to threat, it's linked to there's been some change in your body, which the body detects as being a problem. And so pain is the warning signal. It's a necessary thing. But what happens in chronic pain is that the system gets so ingrained or potentiated, that's the technical term, it just becomes easier and easier to fire these signals, that instead of going via the prefrontal cortex, which is just behind your eyes, and being evaluated, it just goes straight to the amygdala, which is in the middle of your brain. It's sort of in the limbic brain, which is like equivalent to my thumb in this diagram. If you imagine that's the hemisphere, the cortex wrapped around, it's right in the middle. And it will therefore be very much easier to detect a signal that is potentially threatening. And the more it happens, the easier it gets, until it becomes a cycle of straight pain, and it becomes the low road. And people in chronic pain are therefore experiencing pain from signals that should not be painful. What would these signals be? Well, they could be stress in the muscles and tension, tight fascia. It could be infections. It could be all sorts of things. I'm just going to read a section actually from the book, because obviously I wrote this, and it probably says it better than I can paraphrase it. So we talked about the low road and the high road and the inputs. Now, this is all about your survival brain. So what I said was page 134, normally, if this response thwarts the trauma threat, the system resets and normality resumes. However, with repeated trauma, and trauma is anything that overwhelms your nervous system, so it can be an emotional trauma, not just abuse trauma or, major cataclysmic event, the low road becomes the default pathway. Okay, so going straight to the amygdala. And therefore the amygdala becomes sensitized. The high road is diverted, and every potential threat is seen by the amygdala as a real one. And that includes change, by the way. Anything that changes in your life becomes a threat because it's uncertain. And so the brain is pattern matching. I'm paraphrasing here. Okay, so even ambiguous or uncertain situations trigger the response. Indeed, even the fear of a threat occurring is enough to trigger it. And this is what happens in panic attacks when the body detects its own interoceptive signals. These are signals like increasing heart rate, etc., as a threat. But that it also happens when you have constant pain, because you're reacting to the fear and the uncertainty around your own pain signals. And so you can see how people get really trapped in this. We become wired for fear. And recovery, I do want to say, from chronic pain is not about painkillers. They don't work because the type of pain is very, very different. There's no signal that you can necessarily dampen because it's in your survival brain. And most painkillers simply don't work there. They work in the periphery. So recovery is about interrupting these habitual signals and rerouting back to the high road where the cortex and hippocampus can properly evaluate and add context. And unfortunately for most people, they and their healthcare practitioners have no idea this is going on, and the symptoms themselves become fear-inducing. And so this is the anxiety loop. You get stuck, more symptoms, more fear, more symptoms, more fear. And when you worry that your health is in decline and there's nothing you can do, because quite often there's very little that modern medicine can offer you, apart from scans and tests, which are by their very nature uncertain. Some are very threatening, like having an MRI scan, by the way, which is incredibly claustrophobic if you've ever experienced one of those, going into the machine on a sort of motorized trolley and then being completely unable to escape. Is a threat response inducer. And so you further exacerbate the problem. So the whole system is set up to create fear. And our central brain systems are set high for pain sensitivity because of what we've experienced perhaps in the past that we haven't metabolized, and the emotional centers of our brain and the pain centers of our brain are incredibly close together. All right. And so the brain tends to interpret emotional pain and physical pain in much the same way when it's chronic. Okay. So we suddenly are in a default stress pathway and we're set up for chronic pain. And thus getting out of these syndromes is not about medicating the symptom. It's about changing the brain's processing. And a lot of what's happening now online and in the chronic fatigue and long COVID community I'm seeing is all about brain retraining. And that seems to be the most effective treatment, not only for pain, but for fatigue, which is also, it's a cellular response to overwhelm, which shuts down the mitochondria from being able to produce energy efficiently. So pain and fatigue they're mirrors of each other, okay? And the methodology that the body uses to kind of deal with it is very, very similar. So they're sister syndromes, fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. So it is incredible that modern medicine should still have so little understanding of the mind-body link in chronic pain and chronic fatigue-related syndromes. And it leaves a huge number of people suffering without hope or help. I know this, not just because I was there myself, but because I deal with a number of people who are at home, struggling to survive, completely ignored. They've lost their friends, they've lost their social contacts, they're largely not working. Some people manage to struggle through somehow, but the vast majority don't work. And, you know, it's a tragedy. And I just want to say there are things that you can do, all right, that persistent pain can be dealt with, and understand that there are solutions, and there are a vast number of different programs now. You just have to look up some of them: Lightning Process, Gupta program, the Reorigin program. Goodness, there are just so many. SIRPA, SIRPA, do well in the UK. Where they train the brain to desensitize its responses to interoceptive sensory signals. And so amplification of pain is what's going on. And to de-amplify, you have to change the way the brain processes and reroute it back up to the high road centers where, and particularly I think with the right hemisphere, bringing in empathy, forgiveness, a kind of global awareness of what's happened to you with compassion, and instead of the kind of trying to fix it left side that's trying to fix the problem with a very limited understanding of who you actually are and what you want in your life. So it's not just rerouting it via upper cortical structures, but it's more about rebalancing left and right as well. That's something I do go into a bit further in the chapter. But to understand that this amplification of the signal is the central issue, and it happens in your central nervous system, which is your brain and the spinal cord, with the sympathetic activation system that tells your body that you're in fight and flight. And so something can be done when you understand this, but you can't treat it like acute pain. You can't just take painkillers for the rest of your life. That does nothing other than make you addicted to the painkillers. And neither can you sort it through positive thinking or endlessly searching for different solutions. You really have to have something that's specifically aimed at rerouting these signals. So folks, there are answers out there. My book is a good starting point, The Scar That Won't Heal, available on Amazon as an audiobook if you find it difficult to read text, which was narrated by myself at great cost and time to actually get my voice over, because it is my experience that you're hearing and my research that I'm sort of conveying. So folks, take care of yourselves out there. If you've got any questions at all, please comment below. I always read the comments. And otherwise, see you next week, hopefully where my bruise will have faded somewhat and I'll have a slightly better range of motion than I have at the moment. Take care. Bye for now. Hey, hope you enjoyed listening to Rebel Health Radio. Do subscribe and look forward to catching you soon.